this is going to take some time.
Yes, it will.
We'll get there.
Mm-hmm. We're live! Hooray! Live and in person. Boker Tov, everyone! Oh, that was weak. Let's try that again. You're all out of practice. I mean, Cantor's ready to go. But let's try it with all of you guys. When I say Boker Tov, everybody say Boker Or. You ready? Boker Tov!
Boker Or!
That's right. We need light, especially this morning. It looks a little gray outside. We need there to be light. We need there to be not only light from the sun, but we need light from our hearts and lightness. And so good to be together. It really is. Those of you who are in your classrooms, we want you to sing along with us. We want you to pray with us. We want you to participate in the service because we can feel you doing it. So we are going to begin our service with Hine Matov. It's an appropriate song for us to sing this morning, Hine Matov, because how good and how pleasant it is when brothers and sisters can dwell together in peace. Right, Cantor?
Yes, Rabbi.
All
Goes
right.
like this. How about this? Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, hine Matov. Oh! La 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 la. Hine Matov, hine Matov. La 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 la. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov, hine Matov. Oh! La 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 la. Hine Matov, hine Matov. Go, Rabbi! La 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 la. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine Matov u'manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
Sometimes in the morning it's good to stretch. Can I see you stretch? Oh, it is good to stretch, particularly in the morning. But sometimes it's not only good to stretch our bodies, but it's good to stretch our hearts and our minds. And sometimes we need to feel uplifted in prayer and by being together and learning together. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Place your hands up in the sky like that. Now use your hands to pull you out of your seat. Can you do that? You can do it. All right. And I want you to all to rise and stand up, and let's greet the morning and greet each other as we turn to the call to prayer, which can be found in your prayer books if you're following along in your prayer books, in your Siddur, on page 58. Page 58.
Yalla lie, lie, lie. 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 Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. Le'olam va'ed. Le'olam va'ed. Yalla lie, lie, lie. 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 Yalla lie, lie, lie.
There are two great lights that light up our lives. We have the sun that merges in the day and it rises up, like beautiful sunrises. But when the sun sets, sometimes we get to see the moon out and it shines its light down upon us as well, a reflection of the light of the sun. Both of these are great and wonderful lights that exist in the world, but there is a light that is deeper, a light that comes from each and every one of you, a light that comes when we gather together, a light that comes when we gather and study Torah. And so on page 61, we give thanks for all those lights in our lives. Let's read, where were you, this is God speaking, where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions or who measured it with a line unto what were its bases sunk? Who set its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the divine beings shouted for joy? Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. Blessed are you, Adonai, creator of light. We are going to turn now as we think about those great lights that exist in our lives, but there is really only one that sets all of it in motion in our lives. So I'm going to ask you to take your hands, place them up in the sky again, let them fall gently down over your eyes as we listen and we think about the oneness of all things as we recite the Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
You may be seated. We turn to these words of Ve'ahavta.
You shall love Adonai your God with all your soul and with all of your might. Hold on tight as you go, teach them what you know. Teach them as they grow. Teach them so they know. Teach them so they know.
Thank you, Miss Wendy. On page 72, there is the Micha Mocha. Now, this prayer, it was sung, or this celebratory song was sung as our ancestors crossed the sea, but there's a story that I want to share with you, a brief one, about what happened. So a long time ago, there were these two named Ploni and Honi. And Ploni and Honi, as they were walking through from Egypt to Israel, were complaining a whole lot. One of them was complaining, oh, things are really tough for us. And they saw that Moses lifted his arm and the staff and God parted the sea, and everybody could not believe their eyes at the miracle. But Ploni and Honi, as they were walking through, they smelled the sulfur from the sea, and their feet were stuck in the sand below them, and they said, yuck, this is so gross, the smell, yuck. Oh, my feet are getting stuck in the sand. They looked over and they saw fish swimming in the water, and they said, yuck. There is so much, I don't like the smell of fish. I don't like fish very much. And they complained, and they complained, and they complained as they focused on all of the things that were bad and challenging in their lives all the way to the other side. And when they got to the other side, they noticed as people were looking back at everything they had experienced, and they were singing this song. But Ploni and Honi didn't understand why, because they missed the miracles that were right in front of them. We want you to be able to see all of the miracles that exist all around us. That's the miracles of being together, the miracles that come when you look at your neighbor and you say, that's my friend. That's a miracle too. Miracles of sunrise and sunset. The miracle comes when we are able to learn Torah together. So let's be those who learn from the miracles that exist in our lives as we turn to Micha Mocha.
Micha Mocha Ba'elim Adonai Micha Mocha Nehedar B'Kodesh Norah Tehilot Osei Felech Micha bakodesh.
Now, let's turn once again to prayer. When we think the prayers of our heart, when we think the prayers of our ancestors' words, we feel as though we're standing before something that is beyond us, something that's greater than us, something that is divine. So let's stand together now as we turn to the tefillah, which means prayer. So we pray the words of our ancestors, but bring new life to them by attaching our hopes and our ideas and our dreams to these words as well.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufia gitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot ve'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah.
As important as it is to pray these words of our ancestors, so too it's important for us to pray the words, the silent prayers of our hearts, the silent prayers of our hopes and our wishes for the future. So I'm going to invite all of you here to be praying silently, and when you are done, you can have a seat as well after you've prayed those prayers of your heart.
Says Shalom bimromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Hu says Shalom bimromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Hu says Shalom bimromav, Hu yaseh Shalom aleinu. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, I'll call Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, I'll call Yisrael. Oh, says Shalom bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu.
Good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. So I know we have a few of our classes in here, the rest of our classes watching on the stream. We're so glad that in some way we have our entire community together. It might not be all in one place, but we are all together in spirit in the building and in this tefillah right now. And I want to tell you a story about a little boy. I'm going to call him Brian because that's really easy for me to remember. And when Brian was a kid, he used to love going off on adventures. And every afternoon after school and on the weekends, he would go out and explore different places. And sometimes he would spend hours there. He might go off into the forest and just wander along the trees for hours. Or sometimes he would go to the beach and just sit and play in the sand. He might also go to the library and just walk up and down the aisles, see what all the books were, or go to the playground, or go to the soccer field. So many different places he would love to explore. And the grown-ups in his house were worried sometimes. They thought, where is Brian going? He's always off on his own, exploring these different places by himself. We were worried about him a little bit, but he's also, he always comes home, he's keeping himself safe. And they wondered, what was Brian doing in all of these places? And so one day he came back from the woods. He was in the forest that day, and his parents asked him, what were you doing in the forest? Where were you wandering for all of those hours? And he said, well, I was in the forest looking for God. And the parents thought, that's an interesting response, not what they expected, but okay, they were okay with that. That seemed like a good thing for their son to do. And so the next day, Brian came back, but he had been at the beach this time. And his parents asked, well, we know what you were doing in the forest, but what have you been doing at the beach for so long? And Brian looked at them and said, I was there looking for God. And they thought, all right, well, maybe in those two places, but he's got to be doing other things at the other places. And after the next day, when he came back from the library and said he was looking for God, and the next day he came back from the soccer field and said he had been looking for God, his parents finally wondered, why is he looking for God in all of these places? And finally, right before Shabbat, they sat him down and they said, Brian, we need to ask you. You've been off in all of these places, the forest, the beach, the library, the soccer field, the playground, always saying you're looking for God, but don't you know that God is everywhere? You can find God in those places. You can find God here in our home. You can find God in the synagogue. God is the same wherever you go. And Brian looked up at them for a moment and said, yes, God is the same, but I'm different in each of those places. And the parents finally understood that in each place, Brian had a different connection with God because God might be the same, but Brian was a different person. And I want to tell that story at the start of this year when not all of us are in this space in the sanctuary where many of us find our best connection to God. And it's a reminder that even though we're in different places and we may be feeling different things because we're in those different spaces, we can still connect to God, and we can try to connect to God in different ways because of how we are different people in each of those spaces. So I challenge you this year, whether you're in the sanctuary or in Clearfeld or the chapel or your classroom, think about how your connection with God is different in those places and try to make those connections stronger throughout the year. Boker Tov, everyone.
So we are now going to turn to Aleinu. How many of you had birthdays over the summer? How many of you had birthdays over the summer? So there's a few of you who have had birthdays over the summer. I'm going to ask that those of you who have your hands up, if you'd like to come forward and come up on the bima, and each maybe, I think there are 4 of you, is that right? In the room itself right now? Come on up, guys. And I'm going to ask that 2 of you, there's 5 of you, 6 of you, oh my gosh. Okay, I want you guys to keep spread out, make sure that you're an arm's length apart from each other. Very good. Everybody make sure your arms length apart, and I'm going to ask that 2 of you open up the ark doors. Maybe the 2 that are in the middle, go ahead, open up our ark doors, and everybody, if you would stand. Very good. And now, if 2 of you, or 1 of you, if you want to step forward and open up the ark curtain, and that's a curtain pull on the left side. Curtain pull, just like a window. There you go.
Nice and gentle.
Nice and gentle. Other one. Very good. And then if you come back here. Very good. And we're going to sing Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'tet gedula le'yotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishbechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam. Va'anachnu koreim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malachei hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu Yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo, u'shemo, u'shemo echad. Wow, that is teamwork, Rabbi,
Very
right there.
well done. Every single one
Wow.
of you was able to
Awesome.
help open and close the ark. If you would return to your seats now. And a happy birthday. We say Yom Haledet Sameach to all of you. We are going to turn now to page 334. And just as we are together in this space, we also think of those who aren't with us at this time, those members of our family, members of our community who have passed into life eternal. We at Congregation Shalom are particularly thinking of people who have passed away in recent days and weeks. We think of Karen Pearson, Suzanne Salitra, Dr. Wynne Steinsnyder, Eileen Arbiter, Stella Burton, Kevin Cox, Tony Lynn Fabric, Adrian Katradimos, Joan Levine, Stephen Levy, Ruth Sherwin, Carrie Silberman, and David Wool. We ask that if you are holding a name in your heart right now of somebody who has passed away or somebody that you're thinking of, feel free to call that name out loud right now, wherever you are, whether you're here in the sanctuary or whether in the classroom. It's good to hear the names of our loved ones. And let's take a moment as we think of all of those people who have touched our lives, people who have passed into life eternal, who have made our lives better and made our lives more whole and holy. It's good to think about them. It's good to think about those who have touched our lives, those who have set us on our paths, those who we still feel their presence with us whenever we gather and whenever we move forward in our lives. And there is a prayer that reminds us that we should always be grateful for their memory and grateful for all of the good that they brought into the world that remains. So I'm going to ask that all of you stand now as we turn to that prayer known as the Kaddish. And Kaddish comes from the root word kadosh, which means holy. We know that there is holiness that abounds in the world, holiness that our loved ones bring forward and that we bring forward too, with their memory in our hearts. And we say these sacred words together. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shmei rabbah, b'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen, Yehei shmei rabbah mivorach le'olam ulomei amaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudesha b'richu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say amen. Please be seated. Brian, are there any announcements? All right.
So a few quick announcements before closing song. First, a big Todah Rabbah thank you to Sammy Stein-Avner, who is subbing in 6th grade, and to Cantor Perper and Rabbi Pazlowski, who are subbing in 7th grade, which means 7th graders, after Tefillah, you will go back with Rabbi Pazlowski to your class. Anyone who wants to stay for youth choir, the first meeting of youth choir is today, immediately after school, with Miss Wendy and Cantor Perper. So come to the sanctuary at 11:30 if you are staying for youth choir. If you're not sure, ask your teachers. And if you want to stay but haven't talked about it yet with your parents, tell your teachers and we can see if we can make that work for you before the end of the day. 7th grade Shabbat is in 2 weeks on October 15th. So I know you started practicing this morning and we're excited to have you help lead that Shabbat in a few weeks. And let's sing a closing song.
God created this whole world. God created this whole world. God created this whole world in 7 days. What can you do today to make a change? What can you do today to be the change? What can you do today?
Well, Boker Tov, everyone. Let's continue to learn. That's the most important thing that we can do when we're here together, is to find harmony with each other and to learn. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. How good and how pleasant it is when we are all together. Boker Tov, everyone. Well, I mean, I always do like a little intro. Like,
So I was thinking for next week, I'm going to see on the top, it's going to be with current because we spread with students around the room and people in different places. So each grade is just going to have.
yeah, better. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. I got to get to where am I going?
Is it with Brian and Mandy?
I think it is.